with comedian David Boyle, and I'm quitting alcohol. Oh my God. So today I recorded an Oppression Chamber podcast with co-hosts John Doerr and Izzy Ali. 4.5 fucking hours we were on that Zoom call for. And I tell you what, there's probably going to be about half an hour of good shit in there because those two in this lockdown are completely fucking autistic now. The people in Melbourne must be really suffering now because those two have nothing to lose, they have nothing to wake up for, and they're feeling the pinch as well. They've completely forgotten how to speak to other human beings. They're depressed, they're suicidal. If they're not suicidal, they should be, but they're fucked. So at about the 2-hour mark of the podcast, it just devolved. It devolved earlier, but by the 2-hour mark, you had 3 idiots, one drinking whiskey straight from the bottle, the other one chopping up a mix and getting high as fuck, and me almost ODing on black tea. And then that combination of human beings decided to start talking philosophy. 3 complete idiots trying to discuss philosophy for 2.5 fucking hours. Never progressing further than the original question, which doesn't even need to be fucking mentioned, because the insight I got from this is it's almost impossible to change people's minds on any topic with any amount of evidence, facts, explanations, anything. So after 4.5 hours, I was like, all right, boys, I'm out of here. It must be how some people feel when they talk to me about the vaccine. Everyone thinks they're fucking right about everything, and there's very little you can do to change their mind. So don't even try. So after 4.5 hours of all 3 of us chasing our tail, I'm like, all right, boys, I'm out of here. See you next time. And I went downstairs, had some lunch, had some tea, had a long chat with my sister-in-law, looked after the baby for a while, went back, had some more food, and then it was time to do this podcast. So I go back up into the bedroom, and I had forgotten to turn the computer off. And guess who's still on there arguing the exact same point? Fucking Izzy and John Doerr are still on the same point I left them at. Except now, Doerr's hammered and Izzy is stoned out of his mind. So they're making even less sense now. This is 2 hours after I left. So I sat down and listened to him for about another 20 minutes. And now all it is a very drunk man trying to explain something to a very stoned man that isn't listening. And then when the very stoned man has something to say, the very drunk man isn't listening. So now it's just a back and forth of a drunk man yelling at a stoned man. And they're still up there. They're still on the Zoom meeting. This is an extra hour on top as well. They're approaching 8 hours on Zoom. Melbourne, you have to open up. Look what you're doing to people. You're driving a wedge through society. When has a stoned Somalian and a drunk Caucasian not seen eye to eye? We've got to end the lockdowns. Man, that was fucking exhausting. And I don't know how the fuck that episode's going to come out. That one's going to have to be for the Oppression Chamber diehards. Anyway, fuck that. And let's move right along to this week's Fucked Up Friday. Listener Story Day. If you want to send in a story to this podcast, send it in to my email, boylecomedy@gmail.com. Don't send it into my social media anymore. It will get lost. It won't get read out. Send it to the email or send it into the Patreon, a fucking pint a month. What's that to you? What's that to you? It's everything to me. It really is, actually. Thank you to the 150. I hit 150 Patreons yesterday. Thank you to each and every single one of you, even to the 6 people who are still on the decline list, and even the people who have cancelled their subscription. It still means a lot to me, but none of you other cunts decline or cancel your subscriptions. Otherwise, you're dead to me. Anyway, let's just get stuck straight into this week's Fucked Up Friday. So this week's Fucked Up Friday was sent in from the UK and wants to remain very anonymous. So let's get into it. Dr. Alan Chan was a friend of mine for 4 years and a flatmate for 2 back in Hackney in the mid to late 2000s when Hackney was cool. He earned the sobriquet, which is nicknamed Mr. Fancy. Mr. fucking Fancy and your fucking garage car hole. He earned the sobriquet Doctor from his friend group because of the amount of pills he would dispense on any given dance floor, and he was one of the loveliest human beings we knew. Among the many things I'll remember him for is buying cars on the cheap, 100 quid for this, a swap for that. He once lost 2 cars in one day because he forgot where he parked them. They got towed, and paying the fine was more than the cars were worth, even if he could have found the right tow company to pay the fine too. 2 cars down in 12 hours. He was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor while we were living with him. Apparently that thing was snaking up his brain stem for 10 to 12 years before it manifested in fits that became ever more dangerous. We noticed he would zone out for 20 seconds occasionally at home, incommunicado, and then further on he would have full-on fits. It culminated with one whilst driving on the motorway at 70 miles per hour. He came to in a field, having crashed through motorway barriers, fences, and more. He went back to stay with his family in Nottingham. A year and a half later, I was living in Sydney when I got a call from our mutual friend to say he'd passed away. It was a Thursday night. I already had plans to go clubbing with some friends, and I knew I could honour his memory in the only way appropriate. Get fucked up and dance all night. 3 pills later, it was 6 a.m. A friend of a friend invited me back to an after party, and I jumped in a taxi driven by an East Asian guy, possibly of the same ethnicity as my Dr. Alan Chan. It was lively, 15 people, a nice flat with an outside terrace and some drinks and mixers. A hot Israeli girl I'd been noticing offered me some acid. That sounds like trouble to me. Israeli girls are fucking hot too, especially the hot ones. So she bumped some acid into my drink and I downed it before pouring another and going to the terrace to soak up a bit of sun and chat. Very shortly after, I realized my drink tasted bad and was maybe piss and whiskey. I noticed my cigarette branding had changed from Marlboro to Death. Also, it seemed like Pamela Anderson was standing to my right. I could hear people talking about me, saying, "Look at that cunt, he's asked for this." I rode this for a bit, coming to terms with the fact that I was probably being poisoned by, if not Pamela Anderson, then at least by everyone else. And they are 100% talking about me. Jesus Christ, I've been here before. I swallowed the piss and smoked the death cigarettes for another half hour while I contemplated the fact that I was being singled out for humiliation and there was a good possibility these people were trying to frame me for a murder or trying to kill me. I think that's when I realized this was a big reality show. There were cameras everywhere and they were documenting my ultimate downfall. The taxi driver, who was maybe the same actor who played Dr. Alan Chan, had engineered this all. I got the energy to get my legs underneath me and find the toilet. As I had a piss, the toilet transformed tile by tile into a ship's cabin and listed 45 degrees. I knew I had to leave. As I closed the bathroom door, there was a man with a pale blue pirate hat on, right in front of me, maybe asking if I was okay. Then the Israeli girl turned up asking if I knew where I was. I said, "Yeah, sure, I'm in Florida." As the hallway filled up with the same tiles from the bathroom, I thanked them despite their treachery and left. This is when it started to get really weird. I realized that everyone in my life had been an actor in place to expose my character failings. The ground was spongy as hell, concrete had real give, and this was further proof that this was a film or a movie set. I wandered to a park and spent some time petting a 3-legged dog. The dog looked noble and its owner didn't seem to mind. I left the park and went to a shop. I gave them a 20 without buying anything and walked into their storeroom looking for wires, cameras, and evidence they were filming me. After a fuss, I left there and walked into a newly built apartment with an open door and scared the fuck out of a cleaner. There were a lot of wires coming out of the wall and I concluded this was headquarters for my surveillance. Frustratingly, she also didn't have an answer for the global conspiracy engulfing me. I figured there was only one way to shatter the charade. I got back to a main road and stepped in front of a car. It swerved. I kept walking. Every car I saw, the driver was on the phone or wire to those in charge. I considered cutting myself or someone else just to get some attention. Just then, I hailed a passing taxi. The taxi driver was clearly in on it. We went for miles without going anywhere. He had an earpiece in. Eventually, I tried to rip it out and confront him. We pulled up and someone opened my door. It was an actor from before trying it on. I popped out the passenger seat and slung a right hook into the ribs. I got slammed to the floor and cuffed. I knew I'd hit a policeman and played into their hands. Another win for them. Placed in the back of a big white van, I was cuffed tight on the wrist behind my back. The meat wagon accelerated into speed bumps and I bounced from floor to ceiling. All part of the show, I thought, although my wrists had nerve damage for months. I've had that before. That fucking sucks. The cell was the middle of 3 with no other occupants. It seemed like their main desk was directly opposite. Once I got into the cell, they kept asking questions, which I answered truthfully. Didn't want to give them ammunition to trip me up, I thought, and apparently they rung someone I knew to confirm my identity. In the middle of the questions and the madness, I had to fingerprint. A man took me to the machine and I complied as gorgeous fractals of blue, green, and purple came out of his nose as he breathed in and out. I was transfixed. Back in the cell, I kept my mouth shut even though I was still convinced this was a setup and there were cameras relating this to a global audience. I kept calm as holes opened in my forearms and spiders and ants crawled out. Don't let them know you panicked, I thought. And then they let me go. As I walked out of the station, I had to be steered away from confronting a guy I thought was monitoring me. I was basically shoveled out of the police station. I bought some cigs and a milkshake on the corner and tried to come to terms with the situation. Why had they let me go? I got a taxi home to an empty house, and it was only then, safe and sound, I considered that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't all about me. Assaulting a police officer. In court, I pleaded guilty, but had a chance to explain my story to the judge and every other cunt in the courtroom. I explained I'd lost a friend and reacted badly. I spun a story. I got a $1,000 fine, a suspended sentence, and a record in Australia. Could have been worse. Fuck me, that story sends shivers down my fucking spine. When you realize the global conspiracy against you, it's hard to fucking operate in the world. But I think the main thing to take out of this story is don't trust the Jews. Thanks for the story, man. Fucking great story. Scary story. I enjoyed reading it. That's it for tonight. Enjoy your weekend and I'll see you the fuck later.